NBA players are some of the highest paid athletes in the world, and most of them deserve it. But every single year there's players that get contracts they don't deserve. Players that for one reason or another get paid extremely disproportionately compared to how good they actually are. And today we're going to do our best to find at least one from every NBA team, starting first with the Milwaukee Bucks. Now for the most part all of their players are paid appropriately, but I would say maybe Chris Middleton is getting paid a bit too much. He's getting paid $35 million this season and is the 14th highest paid in the league, even though he didn't make the All-Star team, and has only made it twice in his career. But then again, we saw how he took over last year's NBA Finals, and as long as he plays good in the postseason, he can get away with being a bit overpaid in the regular season. For the Philadelphia 76ers, Ben Simmons was the most overpaid since he wasn't even playing a game, but since he got traded for James Harden, Tobias Harris is now without a doubt their most overpaid, and he's the guy that got his contract due to him looking like he was only on his way up, but then kinda never got better after he signed his deal, which is a terrible look seeing that this season he's going to be the 13th highest paid NBA player and second highest paid power forward in the entire NBA. The Celtics then have Al Horford, who the 76ers are to blame for his massive contract. Nobody believed Horford at 33 deserved another $100 million deal that's paying him $27 million this season and paying him more money than guys like DeMar DeRozan, Draymond Green, and John Collins. But Philly gave it to him, and now it's really messing with Boston's payroll, especially with him being a guy that doesn't contribute nearly enough for getting paid that much. For the Nets, Ben Simmons and Kyrie Irving are the two guys who sat out most of this NBA year, and now they're on the same team. But now that Ben's gonna start playing, Kyrie definitely takes this one, since he's a part-time point guard getting paid $35 million and is the 17th highest paid in the NBA. It's a shame to know that the main reason the Brooklyn Nets never lived up to the hype was because of Kyrie. Hopefully now though they can turn things around and actually make the playoffs. With the Utah Jazz, Rudy Gobert may be one of their best players, but he's also one of their most overpaid. He's one of the best centers in the league, but a 5-year, $205 million contract was definitely a little much. But I get it, the Jazz had no choice. Their entire roster was built around the defense of Rudy Gobert, and he was willing to leave if he didn't get the max, so he put them in a tough spot. I don't know how much I would have paid him. I just know the fact that he's getting paid more than Devin Booker and Nikola Jokic is odd. For the Phoenix Suns, they're another one of those teams that don't really have any overpaid players, because if they did, they might not be in a good enough spot to make it to the top. But it's scary stuff coming up for them, because Ayton was expecting a 5-year, $172 million extension at the beginning of this year that Phoenix didn't want to give him, and rightfully so. There's no way that he's worth that money, at least right now. And it's scary because he's probably still going to want that money in the offseason when he becomes a free agent, and the Suns would have to be dumb to give it to him, but another bad team looking for a young star might, so they could lose him unless they overpay him for next year. The Golden State Warriors have two that people might say are overpaid in Andrew Wiggins and Draymond Green, but I disagree with both. I think both guys round out the team nicely and bring aspects to the second seeded Warriors that they desperately need. Wiggins has finally earned his spot as a top tier player in the league, and even though his $31 million salary might be a little much, I'm not mad at it. For the Memphis Grizzlies, it's probably Steven Adams. He's still on his $100 million contract that the Thunder gave him, and given how much he actually does help Memphis and how much of an improvement he's been for the Grizzlies from when they had Valanciunas on the team, you can't be mad at him getting $17 million this year. For the Sacramento Kings, they just made changes to their team so it shakes up who their most overpaid is. In the past, it was probably Marvin Bagley, but now I'd honestly give the spot to De'Aaron Fox. He's a great player, but he's getting $30 million this season. I know they invested in his potential a couple years back, but he hasn't really shown anything since signing his new deal. He's an above average point guard and it hasn't gotten too much better, so I'd give the spot to him. With the Atlanta Hawks, I want to say no one, but if I had to pick someone, it'd be Danilo Gallinari. And it's nothing against him, he's been extremely underrated his whole career, and the only reason he's averaging a career low 10 points a game is because of his limited bench role. It's great that Atlanta has the depth they do to have him there, but the fact that he's making $20 million this season, is the 53rd highest paid in the NBA, and is barely getting a chance to be himself coming off the bench, makes you think that they could find someone a little better in that role for a little cheaper. For San Antonio, even if I had to, I couldn't pick anyone on their team to be the most overpaid. Their roster is full of young guys on smaller deals, and most players are making under $10 million this season, so they check out nicely. With the Dallas Mavericks, Kristaps Porzingis was the Mavs' most overpaid, but since they finally moved on from him, until this man proves otherwise, I gotta say the spot goes to Davis Bertans. He's on an $80 million deal and averaged 5 points a game for the Wizards this season. I do have faith he'll turn things around though, because I think that was more of a Wizards problem, but until he does show us that that was the case and that he deserved that big contract, he does end up here. For the Nuggets, they have a few guys that are paid pretty nicely, and I'm okay with all of them. Guys like Will Barton and Jamal Murray are making a lot of money. Murray's the 7th highest point guard in the NBA, and while that might seem excessive, I don't think it is. So currently I'm okay with everyone's pay, but next year, a lot of people are going to have a problem with the start of Michael Porter Jr.'s near $200 million contract. The LA Clippers are another team that have surprisingly done good and made it through with having 0 overpaid players. You got Kawhi and PG both making $39 million, but after that, everyone's on pretty low deals, so shout out to the Clippers here. For the Los Angeles Lakers, no words need to be said. For the Toronto Raptors, I'd say Pascal Siakam is currently a little overpaid, making over $30 million this season. I'll give it to him though, he did just make the All-Star team and he really helped turn things around compared to where the Raptors were last year. But still, for as great as he is, I don't think he'd earn that same contract if he got a new one today. The Chicago Bulls, on the other hand, have managed their contracts perfectly, and they have no overpaid players, which helped them save enough to sign DeMar, Lonzo, Vucevic, and LaVine all onto the same roster. And now hopefully they can make things work with getting Zach a new contract. For Cleveland, in the past, I may have said Lauri Markkanen, Jared Allen, and Kevin Love were all overpaid, but Lauri and Jared have both proved themselves worthy this season. While on the other hand, I still love what Love now brings to the table for them off the bench, even though he's heavily overpaid. I've called them out for keeping him on the roster for a couple of years, but shout out to them for holding on to him and turning things around like they have. When his contract's over, it's hard to say what he'll make, maybe around the $15 million a year mark if he keeps up the same pace, but either way, it does make him overpaid right now. Over in Minnesota, it's hard to believe D'Angelo Russell is still making $30 million a year as the 10th highest paid point guard in the NBA. We haven't really heard anything new from him in years since he got to Minnesota. Well, actually, even since he was on the Warriors, he hasn't done anything notable. As a matter of fact, he had that one All-Star season in Brooklyn, got his $117 million contract, and while he's been a consistently good point guard, he hasn't improved or done anything worth mentioning. His game isn't built for him to be a star, and I think we may have seen the best that we're going to from him. Now, the Pelicans spot goes to newly acquired CJ McCollum on a $30 million deal, and that's never something you want to hear for a team who just landed a new star, but considering they got him in return for basically nothing, makes it still a great move. They tried to go all in on a few veteran point guards this offseason, and now they got their guy in CJ, which is a good start if Zion ever comes back. For the Washington Wizards, I think no matter how you look at it, it's easy to say Kristaps Porzingis is one of the league's most overpaid players right now. He's struggled ever since he went to Dallas and never snapped out of it, and it's either been that or an injury, yet he's currently the 19th highest paid player in the entire league over Devin Booker and Joel Embiid, making $31 million right now. He's got a chance to turn things around and prove that it was just a coaching issue all this time now that he's in Washington, but I won't hold my breath on that one. For the Trailblazers as well, their newly acquired guard is currently their most overpaid player. Apparently the plan here is to rebuild the new team around Damian Lillard, but at this point, come on, just trade the man. Eric Bledsoe's now the third point guard on this team, except he's making $19 million this year, which is way too much for him. I mean, at least if they traded Lillard, they could have a ton of assets for a rebuild. Heading over to the Orlando Magic, Gary Harris is way overpaid, but at least he's actually playing games, which makes Jonathan Isaac take the spot for this team. He tore his ACL 2 years ago in 2020 and hasn't played a game since. Nobody knows, but apparently he's still making $20 million a year while sitting out. And speaking of getting paid by a team while not even playing for them, that perfectly leads us to Blake Griffin, who's getting $32 million this season from the Detroit Pistons thanks to them having bought out his contract. He hasn't played there since last year, yet he's still getting paid $12 million more than their next highest in Jeremy Grant this season. Over in Indiana, they just traded Karis LeVert for an injured Ricky Rubio, which easily puts him as their most overpaid since he's not even going to play due to an injury. And shout out to the Pacers for making a lot of noise around the trade deadline. But sadly, the Houston Rockets didn't, so there was still no move for John Wall, who will continue to sit out even though he's currently the second highest paid in the NBA, right behind Steph Curry making $44 million for Houston without even playing a game for them. That man's living the life, and he's obviously picking up his player option for next season too, so who knows how long this is going to go on for Houston. Another weird scenario like this is Kemba Walker, who thanks to a buyout, as well as seeing him making $9 million from the OKC Thunder, even though he never played a single game for them. He never even stepped a foot in OKC as a member of their team, so that's got to be some kind of record. And so does the number of buyouts we've seen recently, which leads us right to the Charlotte Hornets, who waived Nicholas Batum back in 2020. He found out on Twitter, which he wasn't happy about and still isn't, but I'm sure he's loving the fact that they're still paying him $9 million this year, thanks to them just wanting to get him off their team. So a lot of plot twists here, and a lot of players you probably didn't expect to make the list of these teams. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I'm out.